Well, kia ora everybody, and welcome to the live stream for this Moving Teaching Online, combined with CMA, the Canterbury Mathematical Association, and Think eLearning.
Yes, greetings everyone. Welcome to this CMA live stream, PLD, Moving Teaching Online. I don't know where you are or when at the moment, but the situation here in Christchurch, New Zealand has changed so rapidly in the last week that this is our third attempt to present this PLD and the last possible opportunity for Stephen and I to record together before the whole country goes into lockdown later on tonight. My name is Jane Gray and I'm the kaiarahi for the Canterbury and Aoraki Maths Associations. It's a new position, and I'm responsible for organising the professional development for maths teachers in Canterbury, South Canterbury and on the West Coast. And I'm delighted to have been able to organise my old young friend Stephen McConaughey to deliver some much wanted PLD about how to move your teaching online. Stephen, you were converted to e-learning many years ago, and your own experimentation and practice has gained you an international reputation in this field, I understand. And we're very fortunate. We're about to benefit from your vast and practical experience. So now I should add that I am the digital refugee that Stephen outed in a recent podcast. But I'll try not to slow things down too much, although that is a little bit, what I'm here for. But you'll be able to rerun this cast, and you'll be able to fast forward to bits you want to see using time codes. So, Stephen, it's great to be working with you again.
Thank you. I've prepared a wee slideshow, if you will. So we're just going to talk through it, interrupt at any point. So the purpose of having Jane here is that we can go through and you can have it as if you were in the crowd in our physical PD room, which we had planned and can no longer have.
Indeed.
So Jane is you interrupting and saying, "Wait, Stephen, what about the thing? And what about the stuff?" So it's going to be relaxed, but just moving through.
Yeah. So I'm the everyman.
You're the everyman.
Yeah, the every digital refugee.
Cool. Okay. Well, I wanted to start actually before we get into kind of the content. I wanted to start with a bit of an introduction of who we are and our story. So we were both teaching in Christchurch during the earthquakes, 2011, so almost 10 years ago now, and some similarities and some differences. So how would you tell your story? Digital stuff and earthquakes. Go.
Okay, earthquakes. I feel inside me, I feel as very like I did after the very first earthquake in, what was that, September 2010. Quite excited, quite hyper, really looking forward to seeing what's going to happen, because with a math science background, this is all fascinating. And we've got a front seat in the Great History Show here. They're going to be talking about this event for hundreds and hundreds of years. So I can't help but feel really interested. And that's how I felt when the earthquakes first happened. But then, after several years, it grinds you down. And various things that have happened with, your home, your insurance, your school situation, they all affected that. So at the moment, I'm feeling really interested to see what happens with the pandemic. But I know that the social pain is going to come, and that's going to affect my my well-being as well.
Yeah, of course, and we're going to talk about some well-being stuff as well, teachers and students.
Do you think this is easier or harder than the earthquakes?
So far it's easier, because with the earthquake there was a great deal more trauma in terms of,
somewhere to live.
Yeah, although...
Water to drink.
Yeah.
Food to eat.
Yeah.
We couldn't get money out of the banks.
Yeah, it was a crazy time. I definitely think it's easier so far with the pandemic, but the effect on education is real similarities, but also real differences. We were shut down in the earthquake, so I was teaching at Linwood College, and you were at Hillmorton High School. So Linwood College, where I was teaching, was shut down completely for several weeks, and we ended up doing online teaching bits and pieces back in the early days. So 2011, there wasn't a lot of online stuff to... there are a couple of teachers using Wikispaces and a couple of teachers using Moodle, and I can only imagine if this pandemic had happened a couple of years ago, let alone in 2011. We have opportunity now that we just wouldn't have had before.
Absolutely.
So I guess that's kind of what we're talking through here.
It's like the Chinese say, that the kanji for disaster is danger and opportunity, isn't that so? And I've noticed already this has been an opportunity in our school to learn new things. I've already started learning new things and have put them into practice just within the last day even. So it's going to be fascinating to see what happens over the next several months as far as teaching goes.
Yeah, for sure. Well, shall we crack into that then?
Yep.
So first thing I want to talk about, I guess, is balancing best practice with kind practice. There's a lot of...
So are you going to be talking about, I hope you're going to be talking about, I think you are, the big picture concepts, ideas that teachers need to grapple with first before they even get to any of the technical details about, what program they're going to use and how to work it.
Yeah. So at the end of this video, I'll go home and I'll record a couple of like a little brief, if you're on Google Classroom, here's a 30-second getting started thing for those that want it. And if you're on Microsoft, Office 365, here's a 30-second intro to Microsoft Teams, and one for Zoom as well. But I'll put them on the end so that people that don't need it can skip through. But I really want to talk about the general principles first.
Great. Because I heard your last podcast with Ben Hilliam.
Oh, yes.
And I was really interested in that. Some of the things that you were saying about relationship building and relationship keeping and that sort of stuff. So anyway, away you go.
So that's where I was going to start actually. So best practice versus kind practice. I guess... There's a lot of information going around on the web, and rightly so, free content about best practice and experts, and I've done it myself, shared lots of information about this is what the research says works really well, and this is effective, this is not so effective, and that's good to have out in the public space. People are wanting to know, what is best practice, but then at the same time, these are exceptional circumstances, and so you can't do it all. And teachers who are having 100, 120 students relying on them from their living rooms, and the teachers themselves might be a single parent with 3 young kids at home, or sharing a flat with 6 other people and there's really slow internet and 2 laptops total, or we don't know the different situations everybody's going to be in. So my first piece of advice for all teachers looking at doing remote teaching, or online teaching or distance learning or whatever you want to call it, my first piece of advice would be just balance what you know is best practice and kind practice. So being kind to yourself, being kind to your students and their whānau, just, I guess, keeping it all in perspective. I heard a really good quote. It was about songwriting and kind of the pressure that especially beginning songwriters put on themselves, and that's that your taste in music, especially in the beginning times of, when you first start writing music, your taste in music far exceeds your ability to write music, which means you've been listening to music for 20, 30, 40, 50 years, and when you sit down to start writing music, you're a beginner, but you know what good sounds like, you know what you like, And so it's a matter of catching up your ability to create, catching that up to the ability of, what you know is good. And so it's the same here with the best practice and kind practice. You might know what good teaching practice is, and in a non-digital environment, if you're in a physical classroom, you probably know there too what good looks like. But your ability to replicate that and your ability to deliver that online will not be at that same capacity just yet. And just be aware of that. It's okay. Just start where you can, do what you can. I would like to think that in a month or 2 months or, however long this kind of next phase of life lasts, the Ministry of Education and the principals around the country are not going to come and demand accountability for student progress. And, everybody's different. I'm sure there'll be some principals that kind of drop the ball there. But I would like to think that the community will be grateful and not critical. And with that in mind, just do what you can.
I think it's fair to warn people that I know that the Ministry of Education has already said to principals and senior leaders that they want to have they should be gathering some sort of, I don't know whether evidence is the right word, perhaps some sort of measure might be better, of student engagement.
Yeah,
and
I think that's fair.
Yeah, so that's fair. And I think
but I don't think they're going to
thinking
expect
about
it to be the same level.
Exactly. And I think that it's a good idea to think about how you can most easily gather that without, once again, without putting yourself under too much pressure. So there might be an element of, a teacher making a once a week judgment on on the amount of contact they've had from students about student engagement. It might be students assessing themselves once a week on how things have been going.
Yeah, and the other thing I wanted to mention here also is that if you do have capacity, if you've been doing e-learning for a while, so this isn't as massive a leap, and you've got good internet at home and you've got a device and you don't have heaps of distractions under 5 running around, what an opportunity. Because for the same reason, if we're not expecting principals and Ministry of Education to come down with a heavy hand at the end and say, well, they didn't achieve exactly as much as they would have in a physical classroom, what an opportunity to experiment and try new things. Not experiment in a guinea pig way, but experiment in a, oh wow, I've always wanted to try this and I never had time kind of way. And just, some of those innovative practices that...
That reminds me that I think something that surprised everybody was that in the end of year results at the end of 2011, after the earthquakes, that Canterbury's results were actually better than they had ever been. It was almost as if that sort of helped people to focus. So I think that, like you, I'm thinking that results, achievement levels at the end are not something that we should be worrying about now.
Yeah.
There's something that we'll be doing our best as teachers to keep up. But on my personal list, that would be third on the list of importance.
What are you first to?
My first one is we've already got relationships with the students that we teach, and so my first thing would be to keep those relationships going and developing. My second one would be to deepen understanding of maths, and my third one would be improve achievement.
Yeah, fair enough.
And at the same time, if I'm talking, well, I am talking to teachers, I think the same thing goes with our colleagues. I think that we need to use this opportunity. We've already got relationships with our colleagues, and we need to keep those relationships going, particularly within our departments, but even further across the school. We need to keep developing those relationships, and whether that's emailing or Google Hangouting or whatever. And we need to help each other to deepen our understanding of pedagogy and our understanding of how to teach online. And we need to still be working at improving our own ability to affect student achievement. So I guess I've got 6 things now. If you double up the
well, we better move on then, or you might
students
have
and the
12.
staff.
Okay, so we'll move on. The next thing I wanted to talk about, there's been a lot of comment online about synchronous versus asynchronous. So they're doing stuff at the same time, all the class together, live, and doing stuff in your own time. Right. So synchronous at the same time, asynchronous in your own time. Yeah, I mean, there was one graphic in particular which has been widely shared around the internet, and to a point, I guess, taken out of context, and it says, do these things, don't do these things. And at the top it says do asynchronous and don't do synchronous, which I don't agree with. Synchronous has huge benefits, particularly for, as you said, your top thing was building relationships. And so students are locked in their houses for a month at least. So, you know, they're going to need that connection with you, with their classmates. Yeah, they're going to value it. Most of them are going to value it. Yeah. But in saying that, again, as we were just saying before, you have to balance that best practice with kind practice. So best practice in an online space is you have a mix, a blend of synchronous learning and asynchronous learning. So you have like a live chat session, or whether that's a video chat or just a live comment chat, where the students know that at that time you are there and they are there. It's live. And then the rest of the time is asynchronous. You've set this task, they spend the next few days working on it, they get back to you, they submit something, a couple of hours later you give them some feedback, a couple of hours later they do some more. It's not intended to be at the same time, but we're not all in a position to sit down at 9 a.m. and have a live class. So different schools are kind of handling that differently, but I know that the school I've been working with for the majority of my support in the last couple of weeks, they've opted for the expectation on teachers is that they have one check-in with a video chat per week with no expectation of learning in that video check-in. That is a social, kind of informal, take the role, check in on how they're going, are they understanding the tasks that you've set, and if there's off-task chat, then of course there will be. Everyone's got cabin fever and it's only going to get worse. So then your learning happens asynchronously.
That's something that really interested me when I was listening to you a couple of weeks ago, this separation between the mathematical learning and having a completely separate sort of forum in which to do this catching up with the kids in a relationship sense.
Yeah, and if you're going to have a chat, for example, Google Classroom, you have the stream there, Microsoft Teams, you've got the conversation area. Make a social channel, and then you're not constantly policing the students being on task in the learning space. You've got a separate space for them to be off task and be a bit silly because they're locked in their room for a week, and that's probably okay. I mean, check for profanity and for being unkind, but if they're going to post about their dog did a funny dance, that's the kind of thing they would have said in passing as they were coming into the classroom and going out of the classroom, and they're losing that. And so we can provide a space for that as well. So if you have capacity to do a whole bunch of synchronous learning and you know that your students do too, so there's no kind of loss of equity if you've got 5 kids that don't have access to a device for synchronous learning, then you're going to have to keep that in mind. But yeah, if you've got capacity to do it and balance it with that asynchronous stuff. But otherwise, by all means, asynchronous is where the learning should be happening, and then synchronous if you can.
Right. That's a really interesting to think about, because we've been batting it around at my school for the last couple of days as to whether we should just sort of stay in our timetable times or whether we should stay with our own classes even. And we've come up in the end with we want to stay with our own classes because we know those kids and they know us.
That's so important. Yeah.
Yep. But we want to do, instead of the school timetable but from our own homes, a simplified timetable, but it's just so that we can let parents and kids know that if you need some real-time answers to things, you could sign in then. And then all of the rest
drop-in sessions.
Yeah, drop-in sessions. But that we will still be doing, the delivery by Hapara and Google Classroom of the work.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. Another school that I'm involved with, they have the timetable going, but nobody has to turn up at any point. It just means that if a teacher wants to have a synchronous chat, that's the time that they're allowed to have it. And so there's no expectation that they will be there, but if the teacher wants a synchronous thing, they know that they're not going to clash with any other teachers. So the timetable's there as a structure, but not as an expectation. So different ways of interpreting it.
I quite like that, and it's certainly easy for teachers and students. The parent in our Holler meeting said that parents just can't follow school timetables. It's a mystery. And so we wanted something a bit simpler.
Fair enough. And certainly even parents that do get school timetables, that might change when you've got one device between 4 kids and they're all on the same timetable. So.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah. Anyway, next thing, balancing online activities with screen-free activities, because I've had a bit of a bee in my bonnet lately about people, I guess, complaining, or not necessarily complaining, legitimate concerns about too much screen time and kids that don't have access to a device. There might be one device shared between 3 kids or something in a family. The bee in my bonnet is not about teachers who are stressed about that. The bee in my bonnet is about the people who have put out the message that you're online learning now for a month, because that's just not true, or shouldn't be true.
No.
Remote learning or distance learning is what needs to happen, and that means teachers are totally free to set tasks that don't require technology at all. Obviously, if you're then doing monitoring and checking student progress and weaving that into your online program, you might need to, once you've done your physical thing, take a photo of it and put that up into OneNote or Google Classroom or a Teams assignment. But the actual task was being completed offline, and that's okay.
The task I thought of today that I'm quite keen to try is find the box in your kitchen that is closest to 1 litre in volume. And then they can present that. And of course it depends on the IT skills of the student as well.
Yeah.
So they could either, present that on a piece of paper and take a photo and upload that, or they could video themselves demonstrating it, whatever.
Yeah, it's good. And we've got a list here. Just some initial suggestions of online products or online activity ideas and some screen-free activity ideas. So Teacher Desmos works both synchronously and asynchronously. So teacher.desmos.com, I think. We'll put links in the video here for the ones that we mentioned. And so you have really rich mathematical tasks which involve students investigating and that multiple entry, multiple exit concept. And so really powerful, but you can do that in a fully distance learning environment as well. It doesn't just have to be
so that's my second goal there, deepening mathematical understanding, because that multiple entrance, high exit stuff, I mean that's well researched now to be the key to actually drive your students forward. Yeah,
absolutely. Education Perfect, another one on the list. They really solid program aligned to the New Zealand curriculum and at the moment free for the duration of the pandemic. So Yeah, why wouldn't you?
Wow.
Same
Yeah.
with my study series, but that's year 11 at the stage, aligned to all the year 11 standards. So
I noticed
resources.
there's a lot of these companies offering, 1 or 2 months or duration of the pandemic free, and I mean, what a win-win. I mean, they get people to trial their products. We and our students get the chance to trial them and to do some really interesting stuff.
Yeah.
So I think keep an eye on the CMA Facebook page, because they've got a list coming out within the next day or two of all of the free stuff that we know about. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I deliberately only kept free stuff on here too. So Desmos is always free.
Yes.
And Education Perfect, my study series, have both got free stuff for now.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah. Oh, love it. So the next thing I've got there is hyperdocs. So if you're not familiar with hyperdocs, most people are not. I wasn't until I was.
That's how it goes.
Yes, I'm trying to think of something really witty, but it's been a big week.
Well, I wasn't aware of Google Hangouts until yesterday,
Okay.
and I learned
I'm judging
it.
you on the inside.
I know. I learned it within 10 minutes. Well, no, our school had turned Google Hangouts off.
Oh, right. Well, then that's
because we had problems with students using it during class time, that kind of thing. But they've now turned it back on for teachers first, and now also for students as well. So that took me about 10 minutes to learn how to use yesterday. So
Only 10 minutes, Jane. You've come a long way.
I know. Well, I had the demo from the colleague standing next to me.
Yeah.
And that's the quickest and easiest way to learn it. But I noticed when I Googled Google Hangouts that about fourth on the list was Google Hangouts tutorial. So I figure, right, I'll do that just to check up on things like how can I turn off somebody who is misbehaving, and I don't want to have them on there with everybody else.
That's
Check
literally
that
what
for
every
example.
IT person does whenever we're asked for any help with anything. Sure, I know the answer to that. Yeah, here it is. It was fourth on the list on the Google results. Yeah. So anyway, hyperdocs are, it's not a product, it's not a service that you sign up for, it's a concept. It's a type of resource in the same way as a worksheet or a practical activity. A hyperdoc is just a category of learning activities. And so it's a doc with hyperlinks in it.
Right.
And that's it, really. It's just a way of saying if you've got, let's pretend, you were going to, let's say, here's one I prepared earlier from the recycle bin. Don't know whose this is. Anyway, say this is a, I lost my train of thought now from running around. Hyperdoc. So, in the physical space, physical classroom, you would have a worksheet and you'd have instructions, and then you'd have the kind of a bit of explanation, you'd have an example, you'd have the task you want them to do, you'd have the next task, and so on, right? So a hyperdoc is literally just that on a piece of on a digital piece of paper, whether that's a Google Doc or a Google Sheets document or a OneNote page. The point is you've got on the one document all of the information that the students need, but because it's digital, you've got videos, you've got interactive things, you've got Desmos embedded there or GeoGebra embedded there, and then right underneath that you've got the questions for them to reflect on, and like a Google form embedded or a Microsoft quiz embedded, so that it's like a lesson structure from start to finish. The students can work through it at their own pace.
But on the one page.
But on the one document, yeah.
I know that years ago I remember seeing stuff about how we can input anything from one page into our brains all at one time, and the moment you change to another page, then you have to go out and your brain goes out and comes back and reboots and reloads. And so I've always tried to do when they're doing pages, summary pages for a unit, I say it's got to be on one page, it's got to be a landscape, because that apparently is remembered better than portrait. And as long as, I would just say, because I've seen lots of these from our SLT this year, and I think you've got to be really careful that you don't have links through links through links, and that the one page is your skeleton, so that you know what this is that you're talking about.
Yeah. And ideally you want embedded content rather than links. So if you can have a YouTube clip right there on the page, or a GeoGebra activity applet right there on the page, rather than having to
go anywhere else. I can see the power of that.
So hyperdocs are a big deal overseas, and it's been catching on in New Zealand in the last couple of years. So if you Google hyperdocs maths activity, there's bajillions of resources on just that you can steal at different levels and so on. So yeah, it's great. And the key concept that you want is students creating stuff. Because again, we're talking about deepening mathematical understanding. If they're building stuff rather than just drilling, I mean, it's great to have a source of good notes. I mean, so both Education Perfect and my study series is really good at curriculum coverage. Not quite as deep as Desmos, where they're exploring concepts and so on. Although I don't want to say that Education Perfect doesn't have that, because I haven't looked lately at that kind of thing. So go check out Education Perfect, because I know Ben's going to watch this. Just saying, I love Education Perfect. It's why it's on the list. But things like Desmos, where students are investigating and creating and stuff, and even other tools. So getting a student to make a comic book. There's comic book creating apps online. Get them to make a comic book about some traveller who's on this epic journey, and along the way they're showing different bits of location and compass directions and bearings and coordinates, and that's the student showing their understanding in an innovative way that you probably wouldn't have had time to get your head around in a physical classroom space, but might be a really cool activity for them to do at home in an asynchronous learning task. Might even be all the instructions were in a hyperdoc, and then with a link to, and here's the comic book website, bloop, off you go and build it. So if students are creating stuff and investigating stuff, that's the money, that's the good stuff.
Absolutely.
Screen-free experiments around the house, we already kind of talked about that stuff, but if they're creating stuff, building stuff, drawing something, that's really important. Just keep in mind, my recommendation there would be, some cultures have, tapu around dealing with food, and so you don't want to necessarily set a whole task for the whole class to go and build something out of pasta if that is a real barrier for the students. So just keep in mind, also you don't want to go through consumables if the family are locked in for a month. I mean, yes, supermarkets have what we need. The country has enough. We've been told very clearly from the government that there is enough to go around. It's fine. But still, as a teacher, you don't want to be telling them to go and use some milk or some bread or some whatever for their mathematics task.
I've never been terribly keen on using those sorts of things. I'd rather do something like, measuring box. Or I saw something just the other night where you can, because I love paper folding, where you can fold a paper, make a little caterpillar, and then blow on it with a straw to make it sort of walk across, move in a straightish line. And I thought that might be quite a good thing, to... because I know I'm really hot on trying to get kids to actually follow instructions, step-by-step instructions. And so even getting them to make the caterpillar and then having to sort of time it, and we can have races, amongst the class and that sort of stuff. So that's all screen-free, and might cause a fair degree of interest with other children in the household as well.
Cool, which is good. And then discussions start, and then whole whānau are engaged, and it's great.
Yep.
Cool. So moving on, just a quick word about assessment, because I saw some teachers asking about NZQA's requirements for assessments and so on. So I just wanted to be really clear that unless you're being made to do formal assessment, don't do formal assessment in a pandemic. It's silly.
Yeah.
If you're made to, it's not my place to tell you to disobey your superiors, but I would say that's silly. Even if you could remotely, because the question that I saw online was, how do we do this securely and valid assessment and so on remotely? Even if there was a good answer to that, you shouldn't. There's so much pressure on these students and their families as it is. But what I did want to say was using formative assessment for learning and feedback and using that concept of students assessing themselves in a really informal way. But yeah, sorry, I cut you off. What were you going to say?
Oh no, I was just going to say that at our school, we said to the students about a week ago that if we end up with our schools closed, then this was to the seniors, year 11 to 13, we said we'll change the teaching program and we'll immediately switch to teaching your external achievement standards, and then we'll go back to the internals once you come back to school and you have the opportunity to do those. And there was this huge sigh of relief collectively, actually. Good. And so you can work it that way.
Yeah. And there'll be more information coming through from the Ministry and from NZQA.
Yeah. And if you absolutely have to, because this goes on for so long, then is there an achievement standard that you teach, that you assess remotely anyway? So, for example, we do multivariate. We might start it off at school, but then they have a long time at home by themselves to finish that off. Yep. So that's what we would do next.
Yeah, I guess, that's a fair comment. If it does extend beyond the month, then we might actually be looking at, okay, it might be silly, but we have to, in which case, to answer the question of what's the best way to do it, hands down the best way to run online formal assessment is Windows 10 has a built-in mode called Take a Test, and it's that easy. It works anywhere.
But
Google it.
We'll talk about that later on.
Good
if
call.
it gets into the third month.
Good call. So anyway, just on this slide, looking at rubrics, really powerful tool for students to be self-assessing, and it's not so much an e-learning concept, but really powerful in e-assessment. The concept of students using rubrics for self-assessment makes the learning objective right at the forefront of what they're doing. They can work through the research says put your best thing at the start. The exceeds expectations as your first column.
I noticed that.
Rather, because they always go, achieve merit excellence, or got it, or good, better, best. But actually, if you're saying actually right away, this is what awesome looks like.
Yeah.
And then if you miss that, it might look like this. And then if you miss that, then it might look like this. So, use a rubric. If you're not familiar with using rubrics kind of on a day-to-day basis, just Google it, and really powerful, not just as a marking grid. That's such a waste of a rubric. A rubric is a really powerful learning tool for kind of deepening student understanding and stuff. So, anyway.
And that would be an ideal thing to be able to show the ministry or your SLT if that's what they asked for.
Yep. Yep. Which then leads into the next thing of feedback. And I've got two icons there, which I just want to point out that in a physical classroom, you walk around giving natural feedback, verbal feedback. Oh, yep, I see you doing this thing. That's great. Oh, I noticed you were struggling with the what's it. I'll just help you with the thing. And you want to try this. This is your next step for learning. You lose those natural opportunities if you're just doing submit work, mark work, submit work, mark work. And so having innovative ways of giving feedback can make a difference to the students' learning. So for me, I think the most valued, based on what the students told me, the most valued piece of feedback I ever gave was giving students some marks back where I had just a 20 to 30 second video clip for each student and said, okay, here's your work. This is what you did really well. This, I noticed you're struggling with this. This is your next step for learning. You need to focus on this thing, or come and see me next week, or go to this resource. Next kid, 20, 30 seconds. Next kid, 20, 30 seconds. And they loved it. They found it so useful for their learning. And so I would recommend, if you can do record a quick little clip, audio clip.
And what did you record that on?
So that was just a webcam. I just held the paper up and said, here, look at this stuff. Because the students had submitted that work on paper, obviously in a digital environment, it's even more powerful. I would recommend doing a screencast, actually, even better than audio. So with a screencast, the best tool is Microsoft PowerPoint has a built-in screencasting thing. Just enable the recording tab. We put in detailed instructions somewhere else. But anyway, built into PowerPoint, there's a screencast tool with no watermarks, no paid version. It's just brilliant. Or you can use, if you're not a Microsoft school, you can use things like Screencastify or other tools. But do a screencast of you scrolling through the student's work and highlighting bits and saying, oh, look, I saw you did this bit here. This is really good, and I like the way you put these pieces together. And your next step is to do the stuff with the other things. So a screencast of you going through the student's work, you may as well be sitting next to them and giving them feedback on their work. So that can be really, really powerful. And once you've done the first couple, which will be intimidating and will take you forever, it'll be really quick and easy and well worth the investment. Just don't expect the first one to be quick and easy.
Right. Something that I did last year, which helped me a lot in understanding my students, was I used to have Feedback Friday, and I would send them a Google Doc, which to them individually via Hapara, so that I could get into each one individually afterwards, and I would ask them to give me feedback on a particular thing that I was interested in, and different ways. Some weeks it would be a PMI, some weeks it would just be bullet points, whatever, and they would answer my question, and I got some really interesting and insightful feedback from that, and it will be really worth asking them for what actually suits them best after they've had a week or 2 weeks of this. What feedback do they want to give you? What would they like to have more of? What's a barrier for them, etc.
Yeah. And as we know, Hattie is a big fan of feedback, says it's one of the most effective things we can do for students. But he also said, and I forget the exact percentage, but a large proportion of the feedback that he looked at in his study was from other students, not from the teacher, and a large proportion of that, a significant, massive proportion, was incorrect. So the majority of feedback that students get is wrong and not from the teacher anyway. So the more feedback you can give the students insert comment on the document, that's great, but actually recording something is going to be even better. So the more quality feedback that students are getting, the better, which ties back into the assessment stuff we were talking about. Cool. Moving on. So what I'm going to do, you guys we're talking about, hang on, just my webcam happening there. Not sure what's happening. Okay, I'm going to carry on without my webcam working in the corner. Anyway, you guys were talking about hyperdocs and so on in the chat, so I'm going to show you a couple of examples of that. But in the meantime, I'm just going to show you a quick example of Google Classroom and Microsoft Teams for those who may not have seen that before. My main intention is those of you who are in a school with Google and haven't yet kind of taken the leap into Google Classroom, this is just a quick introduction of what it can do, and then the same for Microsoft Teams. But I won't hang around too long because it's obviously only going to apply to some of you. So Google Classroom here is an example class. And so you've got a stream, you can post announcements or questions or so on for the students. And then you can also post assignments up here in the classwork tab. So when you go into the Classroom tab, there we go, instructions. So you see, here's one I prepared earlier. Here are the instructions, and then you've got a copy of this document, which every student gets a copy of. So that's basically how Google Classroom works. You've got the stream, and you've got the assignments. Lots of more things that can do. But as somebody mentioned in the chat, it might have been Carla, Google Classroom allows you to create a rubric when you set your assignment, and that allows you to have it there as a learning resource rather than just a marking grid. So then the students are seeing the rubric right from the beginning when they first get the assignment. They're seeing what are the criteria, what does good look like, how can I choose my own next steps for learning as they go. So Microsoft Teams is the main alternative in New Zealand, and similar kind of thing. In posts, you've got posts in here, so you can post an announcement to the students. Depending on the settings you've set, the students can reply or post in there as well. You've got file storage, just like you do in Google Classroom, and then assignments in here, where you can set an assignment just like you could on Google. So I won't show you an example, it's basically the same. But Microsoft Teams also allows you to set that rubric. So whichever platform you're using, you really can get into the really quality rubric stuff for using rubrics as a learning tool. The other main thing about Microsoft Teams, which is the reason I prefer Microsoft over Google, is although they're both really effective and powerful tools, so you can use both really effectively. But the other example is OneNote, which in Microsoft Teams, you set up a class notebook, and then you've got a shared space, a couple of shared spaces there. One's read only, one's edit, and then every student has their own section. And so it's just like basically a digital ring binder that every student's carrying around. You can see every student's folder without having to kind of collect all their work. And it saves having to kind of share Google Drive folders back and forth, or it's all together. As long as the students are working in that class notebook, you can always see their work, go in and give them that innovative feedback we were talking about. Examples of hyperdocs that we were talking about earlier. So here's one from there's an official hyperdocs website, but hyperdocs is kind of bigger than that. You can go and see all kinds of examples there. So if you just Google hyperdocs. But anyway, you see it's a document and it's got embedded media in it. And so when you click into here, it's clearly got the learning objectives there. It's got video there for you to, if you click there, then it will take you to a video to watch and more examples. Click on the diagram and it'll take you to a kind of interactive activity there as well. So there's lots of stuff that you can do. And a hyperdoc just allows you to kind of keep everything together so that you've got your whole lesson structured. I guess it's kind of the digital equivalent of handing a student a worksheet if the purpose of that worksheet was to last all period. And some of the instructions on that worksheet were, now go outside, take a measuring tape with you and measure the area of the netball court, and then come back in for the next step. So it's kind of that really interactive instruction sheet where students are then coming back and they're writing their reflections into the document, and it doesn't just have to be text; it can be audio and video as well. So here's another example of something you can do as a hyperdoc. So one activity might be where you just have like steps of a proof, and so the students are putting the steps in order. It's just kind of another take on a slightly deeper level of thinking for, in this example, trig proofs, but could be any kind of algebraic process. So students are not just then doing a proof after a proof after a proof. They're having to think, well, what is it about this step that makes me want to put it here and not there? Oh, can I put these two steps kind of interchangeably? And just having conversations about formatting and layout of a good proof and stuff like that. So you might have that as one activity within a hyperdoc. This probably technically isn't a hyperdoc because it's just this one activity. It's a great example of a digital tool being used for for deepening thinking. It's not just substitution in the SAMR model, if you're familiar with SAMR. If not, Google it, SAMR, or there's some articles online on my website or on some others. So if you wanted to turn this into a hyperdoc, you would then have kind of the learning objective at the top. You'd have this as one activity, and then I keep waving my hands, but then I keep forgetting that you can't see me because the webcam's frozen. You'd have learning objective at the top, this as one activity, and then reflection underneath that, and then kind of moving on to another activity as well, maybe with a Desmos or embedded GeoGebra applet where they're playing around with things as well. Maybe seeing if they change a sign, what effect does that have on something else? So that's an example of kind of interactive document there. Just moving through, I'm just going to show you each of these platforms here, just as quick examples of other mathsy things you can do. The next, I guess, four or five tabs relating to a document which Impact Ed are either have published today or are about to publish. So I'll put that link in the chat as soon as it's ready. But they have published a document on teaching the new digital technologies curriculum in maths. And so I just want to show you through some examples of the designing and developing digital outcomes curriculum strand, because I think that it's a great way to engage the students from home in a remote learning environment. They can be going and doing something with a digital outcome. So that means if you're new to the DTHM curriculum, that means they're building something digital which serves some purpose. It meets their intention. So one example here, this platform called Genially, it allows you to, I'll just show you some examples. It's going to be faster than me kind of building something on the go. But if I show you an example, it allows you to annotate an image or a video or something with interactive bits and pieces. So I'm just, as you can see, stalling as I scroll. Here we go. So for example, something like this. And so students would build this themselves. This is not for you building something to show them, to demonstrate the learning. This is the students are creating something as their assignment. And that really unlocks the potential of e-learning. It really unlocks the potential of the SAMR model with that modification redefinition stages. So this is the transformative stuff where students are able to do things in their own words with their own understanding, their own kind of representations. The literature talks about multiple representations of their learning and of a concept. So here, I mean, it's simple enough. You've just added labels to the diagram, but this might be like a geometric shape, and so you're getting them to label the angles and then label the parallel sides and why those particular features make that shape the shape it is. Which ones are critical to the shape being that definition and which ones are optional, and talking about classifications of, for example, quadrilaterals or something like that. So getting students to build something here, and a lot of these tools are either free or free for the pandemic, or have a free version. So something like this or ThingLink, I'll just put ThingLink is very similar. It allows you to annotate an image or a video with extra information, which the students would use. I mean, you could use it just to show students more information about a concept, but it's more powerful when the students use it to show different parts of their own understanding of a concept. So I'll let you explore those yourself. The next thing you might want to do is, say, storyboard. This might be if they have a strategy for a problem-solving approach. This might be a really cool way to do that. And when here the examples are people talking, so it doesn't have to be an action scene. It might be a problem kind of depicted in the story, and so they would then show their problem-solving strategy, or it might be just an equation. And so the concept is they're using digital technology to show in a really structured way what their procedure was. Another example, Pixton. And so I really like the thought of, because this is for comic books, building comic books. And I would love to see students doing something like generating a comic book strip which has some character going on a really epic journey. And on that epic journey, they're using concepts of location and bearings and converting units with different measurements, and that could be quite a powerful way to do that kind of activity in a digital environment. And you might have it. Oh, I don't want a free thing. Thanks. Get out of the way. You might have an activity which has an option. So you might set an assignment which says you can either go and record a video of something and then talk over the top of it to show me your learning, or use Pixton to make a comic book and show me your learning that way by kind of writing a story about this thing and showing all the stuff, or just without any technology at all, go and make this thing or build a thing or draw a picture, and then at the end just take a photo and upload it, because not all students, as we discussed in the video with Jane and I, not all students have access to the technology all the way through. So you might want to have one assignment with multiple kind of possibilities for students to tackle it. Then the rubric that you're setting for that assignment is going to be critical, because the rubric is the thing that ties it all together. The rubric won't be tied to the technology, to the particular medium that the students choose. So it won't be about the formatting and the actual technology they've chosen. It'll be broader. It'll be more about the maths concepts that they've chosen to explain. It'll be more about the general principles of formatting in terms of communication and effective communication, getting the message across to people. So regardless of whether that was a hand-drawn picture or a thing built out of Play-Doh and rubber bands, or a Pixton comic book, whatever medium they chose to do that one rubric could apply to all of them. So that would be a really effective use of rubrics for that. And then you might have a checkpoint kind of halfway through the assignment deadline where students have to self-assess using that rubric, and then write their own next steps for learning, their own reflection, and then their own next steps for learning into the lost my train of thought. Into the doc thing, hyperdoc, or into the assignment, or into their OneNote notebook. Okay, similar kind of thing for book creator. They might have, you might say, go and just write a report, or, the context for this would be another assignment that had multiple possibilities for the students. So some of them could go and write a report if they are writers. Some of them could draw a picture if they are drawers, but then some of them might actually want to create a book. And so if the task was, well, we're learning about statistics and misleading graphs and communication in the media and all of that statistical literacy stuff, this activity might be quite cool, where they create a book showing different, like a different example of misleading graphs and different features of graphs that are really important for effective communication on each page of the book. But because it's a digital book, they can have more media inside the book, kind of embedded in there, than it would be if they were simply writing a book in class. So that's where you're getting your modification and redefinition from the CMA model there. The next personal favourite of mine, Minecraft Education Edition. Now, don't knock it till you've tried it. I have talked to many an educator who aren't interested in Minecraft simply because it's Minecraft. But if we look beyond that and see, well, we just looked at several other digital tools here. This is just a digital tool for learning, as long as it's managed well. And so on the Minecraft Education website, which you see there, education.minecraft.net, there are a whole bunch of lesson plans with clear learning objectives and instructions for students, and all kinds of really awesome and helpful things, so that you can get students to engage in learning objectives in a more deep way than they might otherwise. And again, this might be an optional thing. You might say either do this activity in Google Doc or do this activity in Minecraft. You get to choose. And so some students will run with that. But or you might say, okay, the whole class is in here. Now, the cool thing about Minecraft Education Edition, there's a couple of modes. You can either have it as a live session where you are in there, it's your world, so you control it, you lock it down, you have the students in there with the settings you want them to have. And so you have a bit more control over the classroom kind of behaviour management, and all of the students are in there. Now that even works live over the internet in a remote learning environment, even if you're not on the school Wi-Fi. So I can post some links for that as well. And the other way is you simply say to the students, go build me a world in Minecraft and then export it here. So it might be, you might give them a Minecraft world file, set that as your assignment, either in Google Classroom or in Microsoft Teams. So you set them an assignment which has a world file attached. They download that, add to it to build their world to, fulfill the requirements of the assignment, and then upload that world back to you or share it with you somehow. The other cool thing, although it's several steps down, so if you're watching this going, yeah, I know about Minecraft, one other cool thing that you can do is, I should have prepared it earlier, but I didn't, but you can export a Minecraft world as a 3D file, as like a 3D image file, and then you can import that into Microsoft PowerPoint, use the built-in morph feature, and use that to kind of show different elements of the PowerPoint, of the Minecraft world. So the students might build the world to illustrate some concept, and then using PowerPoint, kind of build a video with this 3D world moving around and kind of zooming into different parts, and then they can be narrating over the top of this video with their explaining their understanding. And the research is really clear that the most effective e-learning is where they're articulating their understanding and articulating their kind of the way the concepts fit together in their own head. That's the really good stuff as far as e-learning is concerned. So Minecraft combined with PowerPoint, combined with screen recording, and that's built into PowerPoint as well, that can be really powerful. And finally, the three platforms that I mentioned, Teacher Desmos, are amazing. One of my favorites. I won't go through in too much detail, but I just want to show you kind of the general gist of basically how to get there. Teacher Desmos, so teacher.desmos.com if you haven't tried it before. A whole lot of stuff from kind of primary school, middle school, high school, really advanced concepts as well. Really good for anything involving a graph, but then more than that as well. So the thing that I love most about it is you can use this to build those connections for students, to get them into that relational thinking, that extended abstract thinking, to get their, the connections of, just wondering if that video is frozen. No, it seems to be okay. Anyway, lost my train of thought. It's hard multitasking. Making connections between the different skills. So equation, a graph, a table, and then on your Desmos applet, or on GeoGebra as well, does the same thing. You can then use that for the students to explain, maybe again with a narrated video where they're explaining as they change something, what effect they think that'll have on the graph, and then kind of reflecting on how correct they were, and then submit that as their assignment. Education Perfect. I didn't log in before I started the video, but I should have, and now it's too late because it'll take a while. But Education Perfect you can access for free during the pandemic, so I encourage you to get into that. Lots of really, really effective learning for New Zealand curriculum at all levels. It's great. My study series also, it's designed as a flipped learning resource, but also obviously really helpful in a remote learning kind of pandemic situation. So at the moment it's year 11. A video for every skill in all of year 11 for aligned to all of the NCEA standards. And then level 2 and level 3 are coming soon. So again, free for the pandemic. When you go to mystudyseries.co.nz or Education Perfect's website, then educationperfect.com, then you can arrange your free access. So I think that's us. Now what I would love is for the conversation to continue. This chat thread can continue to be a place that people come back to for more learning, more kind of help and understanding and so on. So do feel free to come back and keep contributing to the conversation. We would love that. So from me and from Jane Gray and from all of CMA, thank you very much. We wish you all the best, and we're here to support you if you need it. Okay, the last thing that I wanted to say was you're not alone. There are millions, I think it's safe to say right now, millions of educators around the world in either complete or partial lockdown. You are not alone. So get on Twitter, get on Facebook, CMA Facebook page, follow relevant hashtags. There is definitely support out there. So if you go on Twitter, if you haven't yet been on Twitter, get on Twitter. It's the best PD available for free. But if you go on Twitter and say, I am trying to teach this, I don't know how to do it, like I need an idea for an off-screen activity or for an online activity which really deepens students' understanding, and I'm lost. I've had a big week and I don't know what to do next. Somebody give me an idea. It'll happen. There will be somebody that responds. So tag one of us in it and we'll share it, and the word will spread, and there's definitely help available. So yeah, that was my, I guess, biggest point for today was however much pressure you're feeling, there are a lot of other people in the same boat who all have one little bit of good and a whole lot of stress. And so if everybody combines the one little bit of good, that's a whole lot of good. That was a bit cheesy, wasn't it?
Reminds me of this thing here. Hunt the good stuff. Apparently that originated in the US Army's military resilience training. I've just... while I was waiting for you to set up, I was reading the walls in this classroom.
Oh, yeah.
And I saw this real-time resilience strategies from the New Zealand Institute of Wellbeing and Resilience. And it looks really good.
It is really good.
So I think I might borrow that. Well, I've already photographed it, but it's the sort
Don't
of
tell
thing.
me about copyright. Although I just held up a photocopied textbook sheet before,
Oh,
so
but it was
it wasn't mine, so
it
that's
was
fine.
less than 10% of the book.
That's right, and I'm not telling you what school we're currently sitting in, and I haven't mentioned the name yet, so in the whole video. Okay, anyway, what else does CMA have coming up? So talking about the Global Village, what other PD do we have that CMA have got in the pipeline to support teachers at this time?
I think that one of the things that, now that we're all going to be online, we're going to do some immediate stuff like, what I've been trying and what's worked, and what lessons I've learned that haven't worked. And so we'll get lots of other people to contribute to that. So that'll be a bit of hunt the good stuff. I also want to do take the opportunity to do some regular online things that everybody around those areas can chime in to, that may not necessarily be about now, but that are about issues that were really concerning me in my own school and they're concerning the Ministry of Education New Zealand-wide. Things like, the first one I want to do is low-level learners. We struggle now, and I notice that my colleagues in other schools are saying the same thing. The number of students who are coming to high school with maths achievement levels of the average 5 or 6 year old, how do we cope with them in the high school system? On the opposite end of things, gifted and talented, and I think that's particularly worth talking about now, because I notice this increasing move towards completely unstreamed and unbanded classes. And so it would be good to talk about that in another session, and about gifted and talented students and their learning in another session. So I'm thinking that a fairly regular Wednesday 3 p.m. I'm thinking of, not during the holidays because I think we need a break.
Yes.
But I'll be starting these right at the end of the holidays. This cast will go out on the first Monday of the holidays, and then next term, so that we keep in this idea of the new normal, establishing routines. I thought Wednesday 3 p.m. time slot might be quite a good one.
Cool. So how do people get on there? Is it on CMA Facebook page?
We'll be putting it on CMA Facebook page and sending all of our members and the members at Aoraki, we'll be sending them direct email links as well.
Cool. Okay.
So I hope to see you there.
Yeah. I think we're done. Thank you very much. And thank you very much. Best of luck. Stay safe. Stay healthy.
Indeed. Be kind. See you soon.